Okay, well, we'll get started. Welcome to our new meeting location. It's a little bit better than Makerspace. There's no air compressors and heating systems kicking in. And we actually have Wi-Fi available to us. And I appreciate it. I didn't have to get there 2 hours early to try to clear a space to have our meeting. Okay, so Ron is the blame for this meeting location. He's the one that worked out all the details and got us all set up here. So applause for Ron. So the big news is this Saturday, we're going to be making the move to the new shop location. And I'm going to put this on the board real quick so you have an idea what's going on. This will be the new shop. The road that you come down goes this way. And there's a small parking area here. And when if it's empty, you can park there, but it doesn't take many cars. So if you're going to be working Saturday, don't park. Her house is over here. Don't drive on the grass over there because that's part of her septic system and you get weight on it, and that's not a good idea. Now, there is a road here that goes around, and I think it comes back like this. So you can park on that, and you can park on the main road Saturday. You don't want to park in this area because that's where the big garage door is, and that's where we're going to be offloading. So we're going to be meeting at the, do we have an eraser? Oh, okay. Yes. So we'll be meeting at Makerspace at 9 o'clock. And like I was mentioning, who's all going to come that's here? Okay. I'm going to need a couple people that have more flexibility than a lot of us old folks. The reason I say that is because the 4 workbenches that are ours with our vices on have to be disconnected from the bases. And you got to crawl underneath, and they're just held on with Phillips screws, but somebody's got to be willing to go underneath and take them off. So. But you still have to crawl into it because there's a cabinet underneath it. So hopefully we have a couple people that can do that. Yeah. And we will have screw guns, so won't be a problem. Okay, I have a truck rented, and we have at least 2 or 3 people with trailers, so that we should be load up, go down there on one ship and unload. So I mean, hopefully we'll be done by noon, is what I'm thinking. And getting down there is a straight thing. We Tryon Road is right near Makerspace. We take that down all the way to Lake Wiley, across the river, and on the other side is 274. And we just turn right on 274 and we're almost there. So it's an easier place to get to. So any questions about the move? Yes. I would say about that. I haven't actually done that, but I know from my house in Matthews, it's about 35 minutes to the new shop. So it isn't, a lot of people think it's really far, but I guess if you live up in the north side like Bob Fields there, it'd be a trek. Well, that's why we decided not to have meetings there. This is more of a central location here for meetings. But if we're going to have classes, which is the main reason we wanted the shop, I mean, I think if you're going to go to a class, you're willing to drive an extra 10, 15 minutes. You know, it's not that big of a deal. Yeah, the traffic's not bad on Saturday. Okay. So again, the emphasis for the new shops initially is going to be classes. And I got a couple list of a couple ideas for classes. We, we're probably going to be in two groups. We're going to have like what I would call like a half day or 1 day class. And that'll be in things like sharpening, hand cutting dovetails, table saw techniques. Um, what else we have here? Anyhow, we're gonna stuff like that. Oh, and another one I thought of possibly would be um, bandsaw boxes, and I will get back to that. Okay, and then some of the longer classes would be like the three-legged stool. That's going to be that I made at Makerspace recently. Dulcimer, making dulcimers. And that's probably going to involve what, 2, 3 Saturdays. So yeah, so that would be a bigger project, obviously. And I didn't bring it tonight, but we had classes on shaker tables, and that may take, you know, 3, 4 weeks too. And again, it doesn't have to be scheduled 4 weeks consecutively. It's whatever works out with the members. But the nice thing is we do have pallet racks there, and there should be some open ones that if you're working on a table, you can leave it there unless you want to take it home. But otherwise, you can leave the stuff there and you don't have to haul it back and forth. Um, let's see what some of the other ones that we have. Okay, the chair building would be another one. For some reason, people are scared of chairs. And it's probably the most difficult thing to make compared to other pieces of furniture. But we have had a chair class in the past, and that worked out pretty successfully. Another thing we're looking at possibility is a class on AutoCAD, auto design, or SketchUp, or that kind of thing. And anyhow, that's a couple of the ideas. Now, we need several things from you. One, if you have a class that you would like to see, let us know. And more importantly, if there's a class that you think you could teach and you'd be willing to teach, let us know. Now, from seeing some of the stuff that's been brought here for show and tell, and seeing some of the stuff that showed up at the auction that we do for One Special Christmas, and what we show on display at Matthews Alive, there's people with talent in this club that we haven't heard from. So maybe we can have somebody take the step, step beyond your area of comfort and maybe teach a class. I'm thinking one thing off the bat was shaker bandsaw boxes, not to put Todd on. But that would be a good Saturday morning class. And we will have 3 bandsaws at the new shop. So it would be something that, could be done and people would have hands-on experience. So think about that. Huh? How many people have made a bandsaw box? Anybody? Okay, we only have two. So, but you did a pretty good job. You got that prize for, yeah, that was a difficult one. And I'm just saying, keep that in mind. Okay. Now it's going to take a little while to get the shop set up. Probably the first class we're going to do, I won't call it a class, but a project. Those tabletops that I talked about that we have to take off the bases, well, we got to make bases for them. And Bob's going to be in charge of that. He's coming up with a design, and he's going to need somebody with a truck when he picks up the lumber. So if anybody can help Bob, let him know. And I know we don't have exact schedule for it yet. Bob, you think? Hmm? Okay. Now, originally, anyhow, you'll hear more about that. Originally, I thought we needed to do this real quick, but we do have two big tables down there now. So we have big tables to work off of. They won't have vices on them like the tops that we have, but being that maker space, most of the time people aren't using the vices anyhow.
Will we have a table saw up and running?
Well, we can have a table saw up and running Saturday after we get there and plug it in. We got half a dozen chop saws down there. Yeah. Well, not chop saws, they're miter saws. The ones with the longer piece. No, he has a table saw down there, cabinet saw that's is running, and we have our saw stop down there. So I would think in a couple of weeks, the shop will be operational as far as being able to do stuff. Maybe not everything, but we will have the planer, the joiner, the table saw, band saws, that kind of thing. It may take a little bit longer for us to figure out where we're going to put the lathes and getting them going. So originally we were talking about just having classes there. Yes. Roughly 2,000. And just mainly classes, but a lot of people have expressed an interest in an open shop down there. And again, if we have enough interest, we can have an open shop. And then we just have to determine when that should be. Should that be during the week like we have now, or on a Saturday? Personally, I would think it'd probably be during the week, because when I had 3 open shops at Maker Space on Saturdays, nobody showed up. And after I had done that 3 times, I said, oh, I'm not going to do it anymore. So we're going to give us 2 or 3 weeks to get the shop set up. There's things we want to do. It has fluorescent lights. We want to change them out to LEDs. We've got all the materials for that. Jim Emery is going to do a little bit more electrical work. We'll probably run another outlet in for 220. We've got 220 circuits in there, but we only got 2 boxes in the shop itself for 220. So stuff like that, it's going to take a couple of weeks, at least 2 or 3. Once we're ready to start setting up an open shop, well, then we'll let everybody know. Yeah. Well, we'll work out the times in that once we get it, we have everybody who wants to do it give their input. Yes.
Bruce, excuse me, I'm gonna repeat the question for the Zoom people that couldn't hear the audio. The comment was made about traffic at a certain point in time on the bridge near where on the way to the new shop location, and we'll just have to work through these issues. So I'll keep repeating the questions. Go ahead.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry, I didn't hear any of that.
She said, what's the procedure for entering and leaving? Is there a key fob necessary for like makerspace?
If we have an open shop, it's going to be scheduled, and it will be, we will have somebody there like Bob Fields, myself, and Mike Smith as a foreman. Somebody with enough machine experience in that to help you out. So we will say a specific day and specific times. So you don't need a fob or anything like that. It's not going to be like Makerspace where you can go anytime you want on your own. Again, we want to have somebody there, like a foreman. And again, if it's really popular, we can just look about expanding that. But we'll take it one step at a time.
Bruce, one thing I can comment on, and it may interest other people as well. I don't have lathe experience, don't have any desire to, but I can certainly be on site on a Monday if the requirements needed are not related to lathe work. So if to give some of you guys a break that have been doing this forever, I can help out. I don't know who else can.
Well, on that, we have two people, club members with a lot of experience in working woodworking machinery in that. They're more like cabinet work. They may not have experience on lathes, for example, who are willing to do it. And it's actually for Bob Mobley, he's closer than his makerspace is because he's from Gastonia. And he can go straight down 274 and he has an expression interest in him. And it's not far from me. It's about the same distance as makerspace. So I think we can have enough people to run it. Yeah. And don't worry, I keep that in mind.
Courtney?
Just like to propose an open shop day for those of us who still have to work, and unfortunately, I'm reached retirement age, so maybe a weekend day. possibly.
Well, again, I did it, if we have again enough people who would take advantage of it. Again, for just one person, like you said, it is for someone to go there and open up the shop, like the leader, well, we want to make it worthwhile.
Jordan?
Well,
Do we need to use Sign Up Genius to get an idea of who signed up for whatever classes or open Mondays?
well, actually, we have a place on our website for events that you can sign up for. And when we go to our classes, that's how we're going to sign up for classes. And that's on the website. And Bob, I think you're just going to make sure that that's working properly, right? Because we haven't used it for a while. I mean, we got to work the details out. And up to this week, we weren't even going to consider open shop for a while. But since there's a lot of people expressing interest, we're going to try to do that. There'll be more information to come. All right.
Could I ask anyone under 40 to stand up, please?
Air high five for.
Okay. I've just introduced you to your new board.
All right.
Thank you.
Okay, as you know, we don't have a vice president. And the vice president is the person that usually coordinates these programs. Now, we're working on it, and people are trying to step up, but we really could use a vice president. And the person's main job is to schedule the meetings and coordinate them. And last year, I think I gave Jim about 5 or 6 programs. I mean, I already contacted people and they said they would do a program. So it's something that would be continued, but we sort of need someone to step up and coordinate it.
And also, Bruce, if you're on the board, all our meetings are by Zoom. There's no travel involved. So this request, it's not a time sponge and it's not a commitment to travel. It's link up with us once a month, the Tuesday before our meeting. We have a board meeting by Zoom for about an hour, and that's it.
Okay. In relation to that, if you come across someone who would be a good program presenter, we would like to know about that. All we would ask is that you would, if it's a person that you're familiar with, that you would approach them first and find out if they're interested. If they're not interested, then it'd just be a lot of people running around that don't have to. So if you come across someone like that, then we would like to know. Yes. Okay, any questions about any of that stuff? All right. We will have show and tell. And after that, we take a short break for people who want to buy tickets. And then we will have the raffle, and then we get started with the program. So we have one show and tell. You just go over there, Mike, and there's a microphone back there to talk into, and the camera will be turned around.
I'll bring this one around.
We gotta bring this
Zoom-
camera
Zoom.
around so you can see back
Also,
there.
just for housekeeping, I've mentioned earlier, for those that come in afterwards, the restrooms are down the hall on the left-hand side. I'll hold the mic. No, I'm holding the mic.
For Christmas for my friends and family, I gave some gifts out using scrap pieces of small wood that I had as gifts. And here I've made a box with a bottom in it here and a lid like this here. And cut out a little handle. I also made this one a little different to hang up on a wall. And you can take the lid off and put your things in it. Most of these have cedar bottoms. And that's about it. I am nervous. Should be.
We teach a class on those?
Okay, we have another one.
Another one over here, the small.
Hmm.
Oh, Ian.
So, I was the lucky bidder, the lucky winning bidder of the Cabracho at the last auction. And one piece had a check in it. I decided to take that piece that had a check and cut it into pieces. And this is turned from the Cabracho. It's, I was told it's the third hardest wood, but it turned like butter. Easy to turn, sanded really swell, took a finish really nicely. I'm not going to cut that big piece up into bowl blanks, but I've got a couple more bowls going from it.
Yeah.
So it's excellent grain, really, really nice looking piece. Just beeswax and mineral oil, just a simple wipe on and turn it fast. And I used a glue block on the bottom, so I got as much depth out of it as I could, and I'm lucky enough to have got a vacuum chuck, so that made all the finishing a lot easier.
Did you have to do any difference in the color of the green wood color?
Well, I didn't have to dry it in mid process, so normally if I got a wet log, I'll put it in the microwave and dry it, but this worked great. So anyway, not to be scared of the third hardest wood. No.
Okay. If you bring the camera back up here, I have something. All right, a couple programs ago, George brought in this tool for putting the burr on his hand scraper. And the point that it was is set at a set angle, so you raise the burr exactly the same every time. Now, I really don't worry about that because all it means is if you got a burr, let's see, I got a piece of wood here. If you turn the burr over too much, it just means that you have to change the angle of your scraper, okay, depending on how you turn the burr. Well, last issue of Fine Woodworking, they came up with this idea. What is, it's a piece of wood, and he has this, well, in the article, he said use a carbide router bit, straight bit. And I just use a hardened dowel. All you need is something that's going to be harder than your scraper. So, and the angle he suggested is 10 degrees. So you cut your wood at 10 degrees, and then when you put it in the drill press, make that flat, parallel, and drill a hole, and then you're going to have a piece set at 10 degrees, okay? So what it is if you've done any of the card scrapers, you sharpen it, you use it, you can go back and you can probably redo the burr 2 or 3 times before you have to sharpen it. So you have the dowel on the other side. And all you do is you take your board, and with the straight one, you just run flat on the edge. Okay? And that takes the burr that was bent over and puts it straight up again. You do that on both sides. Then you take your 10-degree side, a couple times this way, a couple times that way, and you got your burr. And the thing is, it's going to be consistent, so every time you go over to work, you don't have to play around. You can just do it. He suggested 10. You could probably go 15, whatever you want. But the one that George had cost $60. And I had the hardened dowels, so it didn't cost me anything. But you can buy like 10 hardened dowels for $10. And so if you get a couple friends, you end up making you can make it for $1 a piece. Awesome. All right. So that's my show and tell. So if you want to buy some raffle tickets, now's the time to do it. And as soon as everybody's got the tickets that they want, then we will have the raffle. You got all your tickets? Okay.
And tonight we had several people bring in donations, and they're always welcome. These will be showing up in future meetings as future fundraisers. So if you have a tool or supplies or anything that you're not using and someone else could use, one person's junk is another person's potential tool that they could use down the road. So if you have it and you're not using it, you want to donate it, bring it to the next meeting, put it in the donation box, we'll see it down the road. Who wants to draw that? Let's, every first timers here for a time? Come on over, you get to draw.
You got your ticket in, right? Okay.
Yes, they do. Everything.
Dave,
All right.
Dave,
Let's start with what are we starting with? The saw
Saw
blade?
blade.
It's a 62 thin curve saw blade. Nice blade. All right.
I can't say.
That's
right
yours
now.
now, right? Last three numbers, 495. All right.
All right.
You want to change the again?
Excellent.
Go ahead. No, since you
All
want that, you can pick the next one.
Now, this plane has been gone through by Mr. Bogus himself, and it is ready to make some shavings.
Okay, Defiance was made by Stanley in the years before World War II, so it was a pretty popular plane. 485.
Okay.
Okay, 485. All right.
There we go.
Okay, great.
All right. This is a tool bag and a set of sockets and bits that go with it. Come on over.
Go. You can do it again.
Not finished yet.
391. 391.
Someone has it.
Someone has it. 391.
Unless someone dropped in both parts of the ticket.
Oh, one like that.
Oh,
Oh, she did. She said it's going to stay. She went to the bathroom. Let's
So-
put that on the side for
that
now.
a
She
length?
may
Okay,
want-
we'll wait.
You can go to the.
All right. She gave up? All right. Let's see. This is a 2-pack of sandpaper.
431. That's mine. You can do another number.
See, I told you, Bruce donated it, and now we're giving it away again.
378. 378.
See, first timers always
go.
win. It's never fails. Elaine,
We got a number. You got your
we drew
number?
a number. It might be yours.
No, no, no,
You didn't buy any?
No?
no.
Okay, who's got 391? We're gonna count to three and we're gonna pick another number. One. Mike?
Mike,
All right.
that's that's the extra ticket you got for doubling up.
Okay, now this one is gonna be tough. 375. That's for the jig,
The crown molding jig.
crown molding jig.
Well,
Wait,
Yeah,
since nobody else put in, he can have two.
Yep.
Normally you have one choice. No, go ahead. Nobody else put in a ticket for it. So go
No.
ahead.
normally it's only one per
Now,
person.
if you ever done crown molding, you know, you turn it around upside down. And it's possible to make a lot of bad cuts. All right. Thank you. All right, we're gonna get started now with the best part of the meeting. When people first get into woodworking, the furniture that everybody makes first is what? No, style furniture. Shaker. And why is that? That's right. It's nice and straight, 90 degrees. Okay. Nothing wrong with that. But life is more interesting if you can put some curves to it. Okay. So that's one reason why you would want to put curves into a piece of furniture is make it more attractive. In a lot of cases, you're adding strength to the part and added function. Okay, so enough of that. Now, how do you make the curves? Okay, the first part, you can bring up that one picture with the chair. Yeah, that one. Okay, you can take a piece of wood and you can cut the curve out of the piece of wood. And in this case, the backsplat is cut out of a piece of wood. It's cut out of 8/4 mahogany. And you end up a piece about that wide. And you throw away all the rest of the wood. So that's the problem with using solid wood, or one of the problems with using solid wood. You waste a lot. It's difficult to get large blanks. I think if people realize if you need something pretty large and pretty thick, it's hard to find it, especially if you want a specific wood. And it can be difficult to cut it out. I mean, this splat, this is the bottom and this is the top, so the curve goes like this, but it's still about that tall. And on the bandsaw, you got to be careful. And if the bandsaw is not set up right, you can have a piece of wood that's thick on one side and thin on the other. So that's another reason why you don't want to use
Man,
solid wood. The third or fourth reason is it can be weak. And especially, say you're making a curve. And this is your piece of wood, the shape that you want done. Now, normally, if it's a long piece, the grain is going to be running like that, right? So you put the grain here. Okay, what do we have here? You have a short piece where the grain is going across the part, and that is very weak. I mean, you could take a piece like that and you try to bend it if it's even a 1/2 inch thick. Most of us aren't going to break it. You go further down on the part and you get there where the grain is and you go like that and you're going to snap it real quick because the wood was shear along the grain. So that's another reason, depending on your design, that you may not want to use solid wood. Okay, so let's go to some other options. If anybody has any questions, speak up. Okay. The next thing, I guess you can put that next picture up with from the magazine where the guy's working in that big, there, right next to it. Can everybody see that? Okay, what he's got is a big ring, I don't know about so big, about so wide. And it's all little blocks of wood glued together. It's called a brickwork, which makes sense. Like you got little bricks and you stagger the joints and you glue that up and you make a great big piece. Now, go to that other round. You can, now go to the table, the round table. Okay, now that table was also made with brickwork. The, the, the round part of the skirt. Now, there's a couple ways to go. I just take some blocks of wood and I cut them on an angle, butt glue them together, and I put an next row and I overlap the joints like you would do in making a wall, and I built it up. Now, because it was pretty thin, I just used the blocks of wood and I could saw it out on a bandsaw pretty easy. If you go back to the other picture, the fellow had something that big. You know, that'd be pretty difficult to cut that out. So what you would do in that case is you would make your pieces approximating the final shape of your part. You know, so you'd be making half moons or, you know what I'm saying there? So then you just have to, once you glue it up, you just have to smooth it out. You don't have to worry about cutting it out. And of course, then, like I say, you will overlap and build them up. Advantages to this, you can use, well, if you do this, normally you're going to put a veneer on it when you're done. Because you want it to look like a solid piece of wood. You don't want to see all the little pieces. In that case, you can use a cheaper wood for your base. You know, you could have rosewood or mahogany veneer, and it look great when you're done, but you're using poplar for the base blocks. Again, you're using small pieces of wood, so you're not spending a lot of money for the big block. Yes. That's looking from the top. Whatever you want. Well, when I made that, I think I made it about 3/4 of an inch when I'm done. Typical to what you'd want. Now, what I'm doing is I'm just throwing you possible techniques. Okay. Now, the problem with this, or not a problem, is that you're going to have to sit down on a piece of paper and draw your shape, decide how many blocks you're going to make based on the wood that you have. And so it's going to take a little bit of work, and then you have to measure the angles depending on the shape of your part. If it's a semicircle, it's going to be one angle. If it's an ellipse, it's going to be different angles. So it involves a little layout time and work. I would say if you're probably not that long, 15, 20 minutes maybe, and you can get your layout, and then you cut up the pieces and you glue it together. Like I said, it's going to probably require you to veneer it because you want to cover all of the little blocks. And that can be a little bit difficult too. Normally, probably the easiest way to veneer something is with a vacuum bag. But if you have a big part, it's going to be different. Like I wanted to use my table, I wanted to put that in the vacuum bag. But in order to put this veneer on, I had to turn it up sideways. So it's about that big. And my vacuum bag wasn't big enough. So I had to go in and get some hot high glue, and I had to put, it's 4 sections, and I had to put them on individually with hot high glue, and I used the hammer veneering. Veneering's another topic. I don't want to get too much, but basically you put the glue on and you rub it onto it sets up. So that's one of the difficulties with this approach, but it can work. The other possibility is you may want to leave your blocks visible. Anybody seen segmented bowl turning? Anybody knows what that is? Where they take a bunch of little blocks and sometimes they will put different color wood and make a pattern, which may or may not fit your use, but sometimes they use the same wood, but they have all the long grain. They don't have any end grain showing like you would have that we talked about. And then if you have a highly figured grain, like maple, fiddleback maple or something like that, it can be pretty impressive thing to see. Again, it depends on your design and what you want to accomplish. The third thing that's related to this is to make it like a barrel stave up, right? So in other words, you would have something like this. And then, let's see, this would be, you wouldn't probably have that part. You just have this part with the staves to make like a half a circle standing upright. Anybody know what I'm talking about? Okay, that's another possibility. The thing that you'd have to consider when you do that though, is you're going to have to make some kind of form that you can put your pieces on while they're glued up and you can clamp it. So that's a thing to consider when you want to go with the staves, but it can be done. So any question about that? Yes. Yeah. No, it's just
So let me,
built it up.
let me repeat the question, Bruce.
Well, I'm not quite sure what it is.
Hang on, Bob. Bob,
It seems like for each layer of that arc, that the circumference of the curve that you're cutting is going to change as you get farther toward well, anyway, further out
Well,
for each layer.
It depends. Well, actually not. What it is looking from the top again, you have just pieces that shape. And as you're going up, nothing changes. No, you're just one on top of the other. So if you're looking from the side, it'd be, it just built up. So it's just going straight up. Yeah. Yeah. Anyhow, so the thing is, again, if you're going to do something like this, you're going to have to make some kind of form. You don't like green, huh?
doesn't show up.
You
as
have to
well.
make some kind of form to hold it so that you can clamp it while it's gluing up. So that's a thing to keep in mind if you decide to go that way. Now I've seen some furniture. It's more of a modern style where they took great advantage to make it like a barrel top because the whole top was curved this way and curved that way. And then it would sort of roll up like roll over the back, like a lot of bread boxes do. Very striking effect. Something you can do.
How many layers can you do at once? It seems pretty challenging to do, like, in terms of like, as you're gluing it up, right? It seems pretty hard to try and glue up 3 or 4 of those layers all at.
Yeah.
How many layers do you glue up?
I only did
I'm
3.
rephrasing.
Yeah. I only did 3 on here.
3 layers high I'm gluing.
Again, depending on what kind of glue you're using, if you're using the thick and quick or quick and thick, I forget which way it goes. That stuff you can put on, rub it a little bit and put pressure on it. And 30 seconds later, it holds. So you can get by with it. But otherwise, if you're using like woodworker's glue, I would probably clamp it up 3 high. You got probably let it set at least an hour and then you can put 3 more. Or you can make 3 stacks of 3 and stack them up and clamp them finally. I don't think that's gonna be too often where most of us are gonna make it something that big. Not like that desk, that fellow was making in the article. All right. Another thing is you can take a bunch of thin pieces and you can glue them together and you can make it to a shape. That's what this is. Okay, I made a Sam Maloof rocker years ago. And this rocker part, you maybe can see the layers better. And all we did, these are a 1/4 inch thick, and we made a form, because it would be like this way when you glue them together. And the form was on the side, the shape that we wanted. And you put the glue on, and on a form, you gotta have a form, and you clamp it tight, and then you're done. These parts that are up were added later. So the original glue up was like that. With the size of this, I think we used over 40 clamps on each glue up to do it. But the thing is, like a hula hoop. So that's the basic idea. You cut the thin strips, 1/4 inch or less. And if I was going to make a rocker and I was going to keep it out of, these are different pieces of wood, but you had one piece of wood, you know, about that thick, and you were going to form it into like a rocker. What you want to do on the side, like right here where you're going to see it, when you make your stack, you want to mark it so you can put it back together the way you, no, I lost my lead. You want to mark it so that you can put it back together exactly the way you cut it. So the grain, when you look at it from the side, looks like it's one solid piece of wood. So in other words, if I'm going to cut this maybe 3 or 4 strips, you do something like go to a triangle. And then when you go back to glue it in your form, you get that same triangle shape, and you know the grain is going to match, and it's going to look like one solid piece of wood. And sometimes you want to do that. Things like for a rocker, for example. And for that case, I would recommend cutting them apart on a bandsaw. Bandsaw blade is a lot thinner than even the thin curved table saw blade. And what happens then is because you're taking so much material out with the curve, the grain doesn't match up and it doesn't look right. So again, I would recommend that you go ahead and do that on a bandsaw. Like the other process that we talked about, you're going to need a form. So you're going to have to build a form to clamp your parts to take the shape. Now, as long as we're on that, there's one thing I want to remind people about. Say you're making the rocker for a rocking chair. And it's going to look something like this when you glue it up, right? Remember that this radius is bigger than that radius. Because if this is the center of the circle, you know, this radius distance to here is that much, and this distance is that much. So when you lay out your forms, keep that in mind. Because I know people who will take this radius and make the other part of their form with the same radius, and it doesn't work out very well. So there's something to keep in mind. Now, for most of this, if it's not too big of a curve, you know, like something like this, you can get by with regular carpenter's glue. Type bond 1, 2, 3, they all work fine. If you've got something more drastic in the form, let's say you got something like that, which you probably could do if your wood is thin enough. you're gonna have to use something better than Type Bond. See, Type Bond glue, even when it's dry, remains a little flexible. It can move a little bit. And if you try to do something like that, even when after you set it up, it's a chance it's going to come apart on you on a drastic form. So you're going to have to use something called urea glue. I think Woodcraft sells it as veneering glue. It's a powder that you mix with water, or no, you mix it with a additive, a chemical additive, and you mix up exactly what you're going to need because it's after 20, 30 minutes, it's going to be no good anymore. But urea is it's a very stiff glue when it dries. It's not going to allow any flex. So your lamination will stay together. The only thing you got to worry about, any squeeze out, it's going to be like little razor blades when it squeezes out because it's so hard. You got to be very careful you don't cut yourself. One advantage to using the individual thin pieces of wood that you can get some fairly complex curves with it, because because the wood, the glue allows the wood to slip a little bit when you bend it. You know, the inside piece is gonna not bend as far as the outside piece, and it's gonna be slippage. So have you ever seen like spiral staircases? The railings on a lot of those are made with laminated pieces of wood, make a long strip. And as long as you bend it around and you have clamps to hold the form, you can do the spiral rails. So that's the advantage of using this method.
Excuse me, Bruce, does it help to have the wood heated at all?
Not at
Just
this
to be-
point,
No, just dry?
no. This is just, we're getting to that.
Dry form bending.
Yeah, this is basically because it's thin material, it bends.
Okay.
Okay. We will get to the heat. The next thing is a kerf bend. And here I show. You can put that other picture up now, the one with the. Okay. No, not that one. The one with the dark wood. That one. Okay. So this is a round door, a curved door. And the author said to use bending plywood. Now they do have a plywood that the grain goes on all the layers goes in the same direction. And you can take that, and that wood is very flexible. And if you want anything of any thickness, it's a special order, and you got to order a 4x8 sheet, and it's very expensive. And I think what he was alluding to was, again, thin strips of plywood, like 1/8-inch plywood that you can get, or 1/4-inch. And I didn't want to do that. So I did this. Okay. What it is this is just a piece of 5/8 plywood, and I cut a bunch of kerfs into it. Now the secret is not to cut it all the way through. And then the thing is, the thinner that outside strip, the more flexible it's going to be that you leave, and the more kerfs, you know, it's going to be more flexible. Now this is pretty, you know, rough, but it did have a pretty good curve. And this was the form to make that door. Okay, so I made the form first because I did this in a vacuum press. Again, remember we talked about a vacuum press? And if you make a form for something, you don't make it strong enough, that vacuum press will crush your work. So this is pretty hefty. You know, you can see I have a number of pieces of plywood underneath there. And so that's you have to have it that strong. So for the door, I did the same thing, except after making this, I learned that I had to put the more curves into it so that I would have a smoother bend. you can look at it later. If you run your hand across it, you can feel like little ridges for sharper points. And I didn't want that in the door, so that's why I had to put more kerfs into it. And I put the foam on to sort of eliminate this form affecting the door. So what you do is you cut the curves in, and I put the veneer on the outside, with the glue like you would normally glue it, and I put veneer on the inside. So once it dried and came out of the vacuum press, the veneer on the inside kept that form. Okay, so it worked pretty well. So they do have an app that you can download that tells you, based on the plywood you want and the amount of bend you want, how deep to cut the curves and how many curves you need. So if you're interested in doing that, I can pass that one around if somebody wants to see what it is.
Door, it's the veneer what kind of helps it keep that shape.
You have to have the veneer. Well, it might, if you have enough glue in the curves to hold itself. But putting the veneer on definitely does it. Yeah, I put glue in the curves and on the surface of and then I put the veneer. And then, of course, these veneers are added later. That's just glued on separate. Now, there's going to be cases where you're going to make a real sharp turn, like 90 degrees. And in that case, oops, let's say this is your piece, and you're going to make a 90-degree turn. At this point, you might want to take out more material right here so that you can make the turn. Actually, it's probably going to be more like that. So when you bend it, it comes together, but that allows you to make a pretty sharp turn and fairly smooth. This is the technique a lot of times people use when they have staircases, and on the bottom the steps are rounded at the corner. I think you've seen those because the steps extend beyond the wall. That's what they normally do, is they put the curve in there. And in that case, because you're attaching it to a form, you just nail it. You don't have to worry about putting something on the back to hold it. Yes. Huh? No. Like I say, they have what they call, some people call bending plywood, just thin 1/8-inch plywood or 1/4-inch plywood. Yeah. That's what I was talking about earlier. And I look for that. And you have to find a place that sells it. And you got to buy 4x8 sheets. So I looked at this and the door's only that tall. I'm not going to, and it's expensive. But I know, well, I used it once because many years ago we had a fellow teach a class on veneering. And when you do veneer, you have to plane the edge so it's perfectly straight when you put two pieces together. Well, he had a regular piece of plywood, and then he had this bending plywood, and he would just pull that back, put your veneer down, use that as a clamp. And that's where my experience was, yeah, you could take it, and it's very flexible, and even some of a twist. But other than that, I've never used it in a project, mainly because of the expense. So, a vacuum press. Okay, well, good question. It's a big bag.
Question was about a vacuum press.
Sorry. It's a big bag. It's a vinyl bag or urethane. The urethane bags are better than the vinyl. They hold up better. And it's sealed on 3 sides. And there's one side that's open. And you take whatever you're going to press and you put them in the bag. And then there's a seal on the bag to seal up the open end. And there's a little, I guess you could call it a nipple. that where you can put a hose on and you can use a vacuum pump and you suck all the air out. And that puts atmospheric pressure on the bag. And I think at sea level is about 14 pounds per square inch. So that's a pretty good pressure. I think if you're up maybe in Denver, Colorado, maybe 13 and a half. I don't know what it is at that altitude, but that's what it is. And if you can get real involved into it, there's a lot of things you have to do. You just can't put the part in. You have to put a piece on top of it, so you have even pressure and a bunch of other things. It will hold them, yeah. And if you have a bag that's sealed properly, you can even turn your vacuum pump off as long as nothing leaks out. But it seems hard to get that final seal real good, so I always just leave the vacuum pump on. And so,
Let that cook overnight?
Hmm?
You let that cook overnight?
yeah, it depends on the glue. I use mostly Tight Bond 1 original for, like on those doors. That's not much, that door that we had, that wasn't much of a curve. So Tight Bond can handle that. Again, but after 3-4 hours, Tight Bond is fine. It's probably set up as much as it's going to be set up. And see, you leave the vacuum pump running, and that's noisy. And I got the shop in the basement, and after a while, the wife says, "You're going to turn that thing off." So yeah, about 3-4 hours is all you need. I think it's a sisterhood. And so I'm one of the classes I'm tempted to have when we get to the new shop is some basic veneering and some basic marquetry work. Maybe probably 2 different classes, but they're related. And so we can do a simple project so people can learn how to do it. The bag, go ahead.
Question was, what is
Can you
marquetry?
put that picture back up?
Brendan?
The one we had
With the curved door.
with the curved door on, yeah. Yeah, we can show it real quick.
It took a beer break.
Okay. All this is veneer, okay? All the wood, except for this. That's solid wood. And you see that picture on the top? That's individual pieces of wood cut out and glued together. And then that's, let's see, goes in the background. When it's done, it's all one solid size. And that's marquetry. Okay? Marquetry is using individual pieces of wood to make a picture. Now they have a thing called parquetry. You've heard of parquet floors, which is basically just pieces of wood, geometric form. But the same idea. No, the pieces of wood are veneer. It's all the same thickness. And when you cut it out, you have the background and you cut out all these other pieces at the same time you cut the background so it all fits together. And there's 3 or 4 methods of that, so we're not going to get involved with that. But I'm thinking of having a class to do the basics. And there's one more term that people get mixed up is inlay. Inlay is different. Inlay is where you have a solid piece of wood and you cut out a recess and you put another piece of wood into that recess. And usually, a lot of times, we do what's called stringing, where people have a string around the outside of a shape of a piece of wood. But they cut a groove and they take it and they glue another piece of wood into that groove, and that's inlay, which is a little bit different. And there's some marquetry that uses stuff like that. Okay. All right. There's a lot of possibilities for classes here. All right. Okay. The last thing is moisture and heat, which Ron was asking about. We can use this first. These are shaker boxes. And anybody would know the shaker boxes? Okay, I think you've made some, right? Yeah. All it is thin veneer. As you see here, how thin that is. 70, 80 thousandths, maybe about a 16th of an inch thick. And all you do is you take it and you soak it in hot water. It doesn't have to be boiling or steam or anything, but 140 degrees, and let it in there for 10, 15 minutes. And then you can take it out and you put it around a form. Okay? And then you clamp it in that form until it dries, which is depending on the humidity and everything.
Just, Bruce, just focus it on the camera there.
Okay,
Just, yeah.
Huh?
No, just put that,
this way.
there you go. There you
Okay.
go.
So you hold it in the form, and I would, again, probably overnight's a safe thing to do. Take it off the form. No, I dry it. And then after it's dry, I nail it. Hmm? Okay, yeah. Well, I found out that trying to hold these fingers and nail them when they want to open up, you get a lot of, if you look at this one, you can see the crack. So I just practice, but I've only made a few of them. But anyhow, then when you take it off, you nail them or nail them head with the copper nails. And then I take them and I put it down on a piece of wood and I trace the inside of the rim that I just made onto the piece of wood that goes inside, and I cut that out. I originally tried to do it where I made bases the same size as my form, and then when I went to put it together, I had gaps. So now whatever my form comes out as when it's dry, that's what I use for my base. And the top is made basically the same way, just a little bit bigger. What you do with this is you bend it around this after it's dry to make the top ring. But the point is, that's using heat and moisture to bend the wood. And you can do that very easily with thin wood. Now we can put the green rocker up.
What's the thickest wood you would try that box on, Bruce?
Pardon me?
What's the thickest wood you would try making that box out of?
It's about 70 thousandths, about a 16th of an inch thick.
No more than that?
Well, you could probably get a little bit more.
Okay.
So, but that's what I do. That's what I can do easily on my drum sander. You know, you plane it down to about as far as you can get, which is probably 1/4 inch, maybe a little bit less, depending on your planer. Then I take a piece of wood, sticky tape, double-sided tape, and I put my strip on that and I run it to the sander, the drum sander, until I get about what I want. Okay, again, that's another class. All right. Yeah, you can do it in a day. Except for John Campbell, there was one guy made one that's this tall and that wide. And they didn't have a tank to put it into. So he put it in his bathtub in his room and let it soak for 3 days, and so he could form it. Okay, now this is a Windsor rocker. It's a continuous arm. That means this arm here comes up around, it comes over there. It's got 2 bends. You got a bend here, and then when it comes around, it bends up like that. So it's going 2 different directions. That is oak. And it's basically steam bending. Now, steam bending, there's a couple things you have to have for it to work. First of all, it seems like the wood's like oak, hickory, ash, with a straight grain and open grain work the best. I've known people who've done this with some other woods, but you want to have straight grain. Everybody see that? Or maybe you can, and I can pass it around. Everybody can see the straight grain. And that was split out and it basically splits pretty well straight when I split it. Normally you can sort of look at the grain on the bark. If the bark's got straight up and down on the tree, the grain is probably straight. You start getting near branches and that, then you're going to have wavy stuff. So the wood has its strength by following the grain. So you can't saw the wood like the oak log to get it out. You have to split it. Because when you split it, just like that, it follows the grain. As long as you keep the grain continuous, it's going to be very strong. If you saw, you may cut through the grain on an angle, and then it makes it weak. What did I lose my eraser now? Do I keep throwing it on more? Okay. So if this is your wood, and your grain is going like this a little bit, and you saw it, you're going to have that. You're going to cut through the grain. And that's going to be where it'll break if you try to bend it. Now, if that's what you have, the grain going like that, your wood that you split out should go like that, and the grain will still be continuous. That's one reason why you want to have wood that's straight grain, so you don't have that twist. A little bit of that's probably okay. Here. It's okay to have a little bit of form in the wood. It's going to follow the grain. All right. So you have to use green wood. Well, green wood is the best. In other words, most people who make those rockers leave the wood in the log form until they're ready to start making a rocker. And if they can't use it right away, a lot of times they take that wood and they put it in water. You know, if you keep it completely submerged, wood will last a long time submerged in water. You know, they're digging up wood that they cut back in colonial days, and they're digging that out of Lake Superior, and they're using that wood. Actually, there's some bog wood in Ireland, I think, that's several thousand years old that they've dug up, and that the wood is still good. So if you keep it wet, it's fine. But you need, the best thing is green wood. If you can't get by, sometimes by using air-dried wood. You cannot use kiln-dried for bending. What happens with kiln-dried is when they kiln dry it, they actually break down the cells, the walls of the cells. So, and air-dried, the cells may collapse, but the cells still there, and you add moisture and it comes back. So, actually, I prefer using air-dried over kiln-dried for most of my stuff if I can get it. Usually it's cheaper because some guy cut it down and he's got it sitting around by his house. But it tends to be, I think, actually stronger wood because you don't affect the grain, I mean the cells. Okay.
Bruce, if I could interject a comment. I had some, an ash tree come down, who had an F2 tornado come through our neighborhood near here about 4 years ago, and tree service already cut them up, so I salvaged a few pieces. And I've air dried them, and what I found is when I cut them with a chainsaw, ripped them, and then brought them into the shop to rip them on the bandsaw, they were full of insects, even though they were air dried. So I went to Carolina Urban Lumber. I lived near there, so it was convenient, even though I don't care for the place all that much. And they said, no, they're not going to bother kiln drying for what little I had. But they said a poor man's kiln is a really thick, maybe 4 mil black plastic contractor's bag. Put your wood in there, stick it, so it's got air movement. tie it up tight, tape it, and leave it out in the sun for about a month in the summer. That'll get to over 180 degrees, and that will kill all the insects in the wood. Even though it's air dried, it's dry, moisture content wise, but you still got critters living in there. So you make something and give it to somebody, and they go down to breakfast the next morning, there's a pile of sawdust on their table. Not a good thing to recommend. So just wanted to pass on that you can kiln dry your own small amounts of wood.
Okay, so now if you're gonna do this kind of bending, you're gonna need a steam box. And you can make them up with 3/4 inch plywood, a box with a little door on it, an opening for your steam to come in. You can use the steam generators that they use for removing wallpaper. And you can do that. My wife was dying pain and for her basket making, and so we have one of those stoves that you have for frying turkeys. You know what I'm talking about? The big burner, and you put a pot on. And I just put a bucket in there with a cup lid, and I steam from that. You have to get it up to 212 degrees, which is the boiling point, right? And that's about as high in temperature steam will get unless it's pressurized. And if you pressurize steam, you can get 3, 4, 5, 600 pounds per square inch, depending on how much you pressurize it. So that's why I had to take a class on high pressure steam boilers, because I had a plant that I was a manager on that had a high pressure steam. And because at 300, 400 PSI, it's pretty explosive if you do something wrong. One thing is, every day you're supposed to blow out your boiler, which means you open up the valve on the bottom and you leave it open for a while, and the pressure blows all the sediment that's inside the tank out, so you keep your tank clean, like you're supposed to do with your hot water heaters, by the way. And what we had at the plant was we had a big tank in the ground, because you can't put that into the sewer, that drain, because you blow the sewers up. So you have an expansion tank under the floor, and with a steel plate on. So I was teaching a new guy, and he was standing on a plate. I said, open that valve. And he opened that valve, and of course, 300 PSI pressure coming out real quick makes a lot of noise. He wet his pants. Anyhow, you have to have yeah, he came back the next day. But I had to drain the tank for a while. Okay, so you have to get about 212. And the general rule is, especially with greenwood, is about an hour per inch of thickness. Most cases, that's pretty thick to be doing. Like that rocker, the rockers, the thickness part of that is slightly over like half an inch thick and a little bit wider. I mean, the Windsor rockers is amazing how strong they are for the small amount of material. So it's about half an hour per inch. Now you can try to use air dried for bending. If you're not doing too radical of a bend, like for that rocker, I wouldn't use air dried for that. But I've seen bent like handles for axe heads, for broad axes where you take the handle, bends up. And I've done stuff pretty thick, and that was air dried. Would recommend that you soak it in water, though, for maybe overnight before you steam it, so you have more moisture. But you can probably get by with air dried if it's not too drastic of a form. Of course, no matter what you do, there's always a chance that it break on you. You can go make a rocker like that, and you can go to forming that arm, and that's sometimes you will crack. And I've talked to some people who make these rockers professionally, and they don't know why. It looked like a nice straight grain tree, everything looked right, but there's something in the wood, for some reason, it just wouldn't bend.
So, rocker you made, that was green wood?
Yeah, we got there, first thing, oh, you have to steam it. I mean, it's fairly flexible, but not enough to, okay. Now, you have to have a form to bend it around and lock it into place. And so that's one, again, like all the other round items that we made, you usually have to have a form. Now, one thing you can do with steam bending is put a backer to the piece to keep it from splitting. I'll show you what I mean. Okay, this is your piece that you're bending. The wood on this side is under compression, which means it's pressure is being pushing it in, right? On this side, it's tension. It's pulling it apart. So you're having both forces on the same piece of wood. It's similar to even a rafter or joist you have in your house. On the top, it's compression, but on the bottom, it's tension, just the opposite of this. So what some people do, they put a metal band on the outside of this wood. And it's made about the length of the piece that you're bending. It's got a little box on the end. So when you bend it, it sort of compresses that wood rather than tearing it apart. The metal band sort of pulls it in. And so that's another thing, if you're going to be doing this, you may want to consider. What works fine is this metal banding they put for banding wood or whatever to a pallet. It comes in different thick widths and it's thin. You can pick that up free if you go someplace where they cut them off of the pallets. But that helps for bending. Yeah. Otherwise, it'll dry out. Okay, you have to make your steam box big enough to put your piece of wood in that you're forming. You can't have it sticking out the end. Yeah, well, Bob mentioned using PVC pipe. I've done that, but you want to make sure you get the thick wall. Even the thick wall, if you do it enough, you're going to start bending your PVC. Again, I know you have to use a thick wall because we ran some piping in this plant where we had the high pressure steam and it started coming down like that. And that was just gravity. But yeah, you can use PVC and that's what I've done for the steaming that I've done. Again, I've mentioned the form. You're going to leave in the form until it dries. When we made these rockers, we left them sitting there like 3 days before we took them out of the form. And what we were able to do is we were able to work on the spindles and the seat and everything while we're waiting for that to dry, but at least 3 days, maybe more. Now, when you take it out, there's also always going to be a little bit of spring back. You know, if it's bent this way and you take it out, it's going to open up a little bit. You probably compensate that a little bit for that by making your form a little bit overbent. But there's always going to be a little bit of spring back. So that's all I have. Well, I took the class, so the instructor built the form, yeah. So it was a form that you laid it down flat and you did the big turn, and then you clamped that in place, and then we bent the arms down. So, and everybody, we had 12 people in the class, and they all worked out. Nobody had to replace the back. So, all right. You want to mention next month's meeting? Bob, you want to talk about, oh, go ahead.
Nicholas?
There does seem like relatively advanced projects. Are there bending projects more towards beginner level?
Check your box.
The question was, are there beginning level bending classes or opportunities to learn at the entrance level?
Yeah, that's probably a good one. Actually, I have a chair that I made It was what's called the shaker revolver chair. And there's short spindles on the back that come up from the back. And those come up a little bit and they have a slight bend. That was steam bent. Yeah. And then you had a rail around it.
Tried this out 3 days. Is it still greenwood or now is it air dried or what's its status?
What's the status of the wood on the chair after it dried for 3 days? Is it still considered green wood?
It's not wet. The moisture is fairly low on it. So it's not, you wouldn't call it greenwood anymore. Yeah, the heat. Yeah. So actually, most of the moisture is probably out of it by the time you pour it out of the steamer because, you know, as soon as you expose it to air, the moisture is going to want to go up because it's hot. But yeah, it'll feel dry when you take it off the form. So
Bob, did you want to talk about next month's meeting, program?
Yeah, next month, the presenter is going to be Mark Fogelman, who some of you may recognize his name. He's the administrator for the North Carolina Woodworkers Facebook page. There is, if you go to Facebook, North Carolina Woodworkers, anyway, he's the administrator for that and seems like extremely knowledgeable about woodworking in general. But also there's a variety of resources on that site, most of which I haven't looked at. But it's a lot of people put things on there, projects they have made, or if they have questions or tools to buy or wanted to sell, on and on. So anyway, he's going to be our presenter next month.
thank you.
I have a, okay,
He's going to talk about the site, you know, what's available on that site. And ideally, we'll have Wi-Fi and everything, and he can demonstrate all those different things to go to on the site.
for the March meeting, we have as you know, we got rid of the cabinets that, there's a roll of paper towels in the kitchen, Bruce. Is that sweat or did you spill something?
I spilled something.
Anyway, our library is in there in cabinets, all the DVDs, all the old CDs of all the programs that were presented from the inception of the group. And what we're
Thank you.
looking at doing is, for the March program, I would like to do about a half-hour YouTube video on sharpening. And the fellow that does this presentation breaks it down into what your goal is in sharpening, and he doesn't care whether you're using whetstones, oil stones, water stones, oil stones, machines. You know, that the methodology doesn't matter. It's what are you trying to accomplish when you're sharpening? And he starts out with a diagram. If this is your chisel, and then you want your tertiary bevel here, or your plane blade. And then what happens is he explains how many times you can go back before you need to resharpen to get your primary bevel started again. Otherwise, you're trying to sharpen. And you don't get hung up on polishing the entire amount up here when your shorter bevel here is where all the cutting action is. But anyway, he gets into that, and I was thinking, and I'm just running this by y'all, would something like that work for you if we did this half-hour presentation, or how long it is, 38 minutes, I don't know. And then we brought in samples of the different methods that we use to sharpen machines, diamond stones, or diamond plates, whetstones, oil stones, water stones. Would that help you? Would you learn something from that? And would you be able to contribute your things that work through that process? We're looking for programs that educate you, get you enthused about this craft, and help you. Comments? Okay, anyone else? We're good? Okay. we've got some, an entire library of DVDs in there. When it's over, if you could, just open the cabinets to the left of the microwave over the stove. And that's our library of our DVDs, and it's just cram-packed full of things. If you want that as a program, once in a while, not every month, but once in a while, we can certainly do that. Then, are we ready to wrap up?
Okay,